My name is Claire Rowan. I am 34 years old, and 6 days before my wedding, my father told me he would walk me down the aisle only if I signed a one-page statement saying the accident that almost killed me was my own fault. My mother slid the paper across my kitchen table and said, "Do this one decent thing for your sister. Her loan closes Friday." 7 years earlier, I had stopped breathing on the concrete floor of my parents' print shop, while a leaking solvent tank filled the back room with fumes. They told the ambulance crew not to transfer me to the regional toxic exposure unit, because that transfer would open a workers' compensation investigation and cancel the insurance money they were waiting on. The reversal was not that I survived. The reversal was that the fire captain who overruled them saved every dispatch recording, every hazmat reading, every transfer note, and one email from my father asking how fast a $750,000 key person policy paid if an employee died before the claim review closed. If someone in your family ever tried to make you sign away the truth to protect their favorite child, tell me in the comments what you would have done before I walked into that dinner. Because by the night before my wedding, my parents, my sister, 2 insurance lawyers, a state fraud investigator, an OSHA compliance officer, my fiancé's family, and half the people who had believed I was careless for 7 years were sitting in the same private dining room while their own signatures came up on the projector. My father did not walk me down the aisle after that. The man who did was the fire captain they tried to ruin. It started on October 18, 2019, at Rowan Custom Print in Dayton. My parents owned the shop. My father, Grant Rowan, ran sales and production. My mother, Marlene, ran payroll and anything that involved saying no with a smile. My sister, Brooke, was 2 years younger and technically the marketing manager, though everyone knew she spent more time planning her future bridal boutique than selling print orders. I was the boring one. I handled safety binders, supply invoices, machine logs, and rush order scheduling. I knew where every paper purchase order was kept. I knew which vendor delivered which solvent. I knew which employees had forklift cards and which vent hood was overdue for service. That last part mattered. The week before the accident, I had refused to run a 12,000-piece lacquered brochure order on Press 4 because the exhaust fan over the coating station had failed twice in 10 days. My father said, "You read too much government nonsense." I said, "The safety sheet says that room needs active ventilation." He tapped the work order with 2 fingers. "That job pays for Brooke's lease deposit." Brooke had found a storefront on Maple Avenue for her bridal boutique. White brick, gold sign, tall windows. She had already named it Rowan Bridal House, even though she did not have a loan approval yet. The print job was for a regional hospital network. Thick paper, dark blue ink, gloss finish. The rush fee alone was $18,000. My father wanted it done by Monday. I wrote a note in the production log, Press 4 hold pending exhaust repair. He crossed it out. I wrote it again in the digital maintenance system. Somebody with administrator access deleted it. On Friday at 5:36 p.m., everyone else had gone home except me, my father, Brooke, and a temporary press helper named Eli Mercer. We were behind. My father told me to load the solvent wash into the coating station. I refused. "Then clock out," he said. "I will do it myself." I should have left. That is the thing people say after a disaster, as if every bad outcome announces itself with a horn. It did not feel that clean. It felt familiar. My father angry. My mother texting from the office. Brooke pacing with her phone, asking whether delays would affect her loan. A job ticket worth enough money to make my parents act as if safety was a personal insult. I stayed because Eli was 22 and new. He had no idea the vent hood was failing. At 6:11 p.m., I smelled almonds and burned plastic. At 6:14, the sensor over Press 4 chirped once, then went quiet. At 6:17, Eli coughed so hard he dropped a stack of cartons. I hit the emergency stop and pulled him toward the side door. My father yelled that I was ruining the order. Brooke yelled that the wet sheets were sticking. Then the low tank line under the coating station popped free. I remember the sound first. A wet slap, then vapor rolling across the floor, then my own hands on Eli's shoulders, shoving him through the side door into cold air. I turned back because the main electrical shutoff was behind the press. That was the last clear thing I remembered. The rest came back in pieces. Concrete under my cheek. My throat closing. My father saying, "Do not bring workers' comp into this." My mother saying, "Is she breathing?" Brooke crying, but not in the way I wanted her to cry. She kept saying, "My lease, my lease, my lease." Dayton Fire Station 12 responded at 6:24 p.m. Captain Mateo Ruiz led the crew. He had been with the department for 19 years. He knew our building because he had inspected it after a small paper dust fire in 2016. The dispatch audio later showed the first call did not come from my parents. It came from Eli. He had crawled to the parking lot, vomited behind a delivery van, and called 911 from the curb. By the time Captain Ruiz arrived, I was unconscious. My lips were blue. The air monitor clipped to his gear showed solvent vapor 3 times over the evacuation threshold near Press 4. He ordered the building cleared. My father argued. On the body microphone, his voice was sharp and close. "She is dramatic," he said. "She gets anxious around chemicals. She probably hyperventilated." Captain Ruiz said, "Sir, step back." My mother said, "We prefer Miami Valley. It is closer." The paramedic said, "She needs the toxic exposure team at Kettering Regional. Possible inhalation injury." My father said, "No transfer. That opens a report we do not need." Captain Ruiz said, "The report is already open." Then my mother said the sentence I did not hear until 6 years later. "If this becomes a workplace claim, we lose the policy money." My father told her to be quiet. Captain Ruiz looked at me on the floor and made the call. He ordered the transfer anyway. That decision saved my lungs. Kettering Regional had a toxic exposure unit, a pulmonologist on call, and the medication I needed within the hour. I spent 4 days intubated and 13 more days in the hospital. My airway was burned. My right lung had chemical pneumonitis. My eyes stayed swollen for a week. When I woke up, my mother was sitting beside my bed with a notebook. She did not say she was happy I was alive. She said, "You need to remember that you panicked." I could not speak because of the tube soreness. She patted my hand and continued. "Your father is handling the shop. Brooke is devastated. The last thing we need is you making statements while medicated." I looked for my father. He was near the window, talking quietly into his phone. "No," he said. "She is awake now. Yes, we need to know if that changes the claim." I thought he meant my medical claim. He did not. Rowan Custom Print carried a key person policy on me because I handled vendor accounts and safety compliance. The policy was sold to us in 2018 when the company refinanced equipment. My father told me it was standard business protection. If I died in a workplace accident, the company received $750,000. I did not know that then. I only knew that my parents were irritated. I had survived with questions. The first lie started before I left the hospital. My father told the staff I had ignored procedure and mixed solvents without authorization. My mother told my cousins I had been careless because I wanted to prove I could run the shop. Brooke posted one vague paragraph online about how fast a family business can be threatened by one person's bad choice. She did not name me, but everyone understood. I came home to my apartment on November 4 with an inhaler, 2 follow-up appointments, and a folder of discharge instructions. My parents did not pick me up. Eli did. He stood outside the hospital in a gray hoodie, still pale from his own exposure. "I told them you pushed me out," he said. "Who?" "The investigator. Your dad kept saying you caused it. I told them that was not true. I remember staring at him from the wheelchair. What investigator? He looked confused. Workers' comp, insurance, OSHA maybe. A woman called, I gave a statement. That was the first time I learned there was an official version of the accident, and my parents had already started writing me as the cause. For the next 2 years, I tried to heal quietly. That sounds weak now, but it did not feel weak then. It felt practical. I had lung therapy twice a week. I could not climb stairs without stopping. Cold air burned. Strong cleaners made me cough until my ribs hurt. My parents let me keep my job on paper, but moved me away from production and cut my hours to 22 a week. They said it was for my health. Payroll records later showed a different reason. At 22 hours, they could classify me as part-time and avoid restoring full benefits. Brooks Boutique opened in May 2020. The sign was gold, Rowan Bridal House. My parents stood beside her for the ribbon photo. Brooke wore a white pantsuit and held giant scissors. My father gave a speech about resilience. I watched the video from my couch, while a nebulizer rattled on the table beside me. Nobody mentioned the $50,000 equipment loss settlement that had gone from Rowan Custom Print to Brooks' lease deposit. Nobody mentioned the insurer's separate investigation into whether the shop had bypassed a vent safety interlock. Nobody mentioned me. In July 2020, I received a letter from the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Claim denied. Reason: employee misconduct and failure to follow posted safety procedure. Attached was a copy of a safety training sheet with my signature at the bottom. The form said I had completed Coding Station Solvent Transfer Refresher on October 17, 2019, 1 day before the accident. I had never seen that form. My signature was close, but the C in Claire curled the wrong way. I called my mother. She said, "You signed a lot of things that week. You were overwhelmed." I did not sign this. "Claire, your memory was affected by the fumes. The doctor said that." "What doctor?" She paused for half a second. "Do not start." Then she hung up. That became the family line. The fumes affected my memory. The trauma made me defensive. I was lucky they kept me employed. I should be grateful Brooks' business was thriving because it kept the family name strong. Thanksgiving 2021 was the first time my father said it in front of everyone. My aunt asked whether I would come back to full-time work. My father cut into his turkey and said, "Claire has limitations now. We cannot put her near compliance decisions." I said, "I am still the only person who noticed the vent failure." Brooke rolled her eyes. "You noticed everything except your own mistake." The table went quiet. My father did not correct her. My mother smiled at me with pity. "Honey," she said, "you have to stop punishing everyone for surviving." That sentence lived in my chest for years. By 2023, I had left Rowan Custom Print completely. I took a job at a packaging warehouse as a safety coordinator. It paid less at first, but the air was clean, the logs were honest, and nobody called me unstable for reading a safety sheet. That was where I met Aaron Bell. Aaron was the inventory systems manager. He was patient in a way that did not feel soft. He noticed when I avoided the solvent cage. He noticed when I held my breath walking past fresh paint. He never made a speech about it. One night after a late inventory count, he found me outside by the loading dock, coughing into my elbow. "Want water or quiet?" he asked. I said both. He brought water and stood 10 feet away until I could breathe. That was the first time in years someone treated my body as something to protect instead of something to debate. We started dating 3 months later. By December 2024, we were engaged. I told my parents because I still had that old weakness where you want bad people to act decent at one good moment. My mother stared at the ring. It is small, she said. My father asked whether Aaron had health insurance. Brooke asked if we had picked a venue. I said we were looking at the Harrington House, a restored brick event space downtown. Brooke's face changed. She had been trying to get that venue's preferred bridal vendor contract for 2 years. That place is hard to book, she said. We already booked it. Through who? Through the venue manager. She smiled without warmth. Interesting. 3 weeks later, the Harrington House asked if I wanted to use Rowan Bridal House for dresses, flowers, and planning. I said no. My maid of honor, Tessa, was wearing a navy dress she already owned. I was buying a simple cream dress from a small seamstress near my apartment. Aaron and I were paying for the wedding ourselves. Brooke called me that night. You embarrassed me with the venue. I booked my own wedding. You know I need that preferred vendor contract. Then earn it. She went quiet. Mom was right. You do not know how family works. In March 2025, I got a certified letter from Rowan Custom Prints attorney. It said the company had discovered potential false statements I had made after the 2019 incident. It demanded that I stop discussing the accident, stop implying equipment failure, and sign a clarification acknowledging I had deviated from training. The letter was copied to my current employer. That was not a family argument anymore. That was a professional attack. My supervisor called me into his office the next morning. His name was Devin Price, former Army logistics, not easy to rattle. He had the letter on his desk. Tell me what I need to know, he said. I told him the short version. Chemical leak, bad vent, parents blamed me, denied claim. He asked one question. Do you have records? I said, I have the denial letter and the forged training sheet. He tapped the letter. Then we get more. That was the first real turn. Devin connected me with a workers' rights attorney named Priya Shah. She did not waste time on sympathy. She asked for dates, forms, names, and agencies. When she saw the training sheet, she said, This signature is bad. I know. No, I mean bad enough to prove if we get the original. She filed a records request with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation for my full claim file. She filed another with OSHA for the closed inspection file. She requested the fire incident report from Dayton Fire Department. The fire report came first. It was 14 pages. Page 3 changed my life. Air monitor reading near coating station. 3.2 times evacuation threshold. Vent status, inactive. Employee, located unconscious 11 feet from emergency shutoff. Second employee, stated claimant, pushed him to exterior door before collapse. Captain override. Transport directed to Kettering Regional Toxic Exposure Unit against employer objection. Against employer objection. I read that line at my kitchen table with Aaron beside me. They objected to the hospital, he asked. They told me I panicked. He did not touch me until I reached for his hand. Then the dispatch audio arrived. Priya played it in her office with the door closed. Eli's 911 call first. His voice was ragged. My coworker is down, chemical leak, back room, please hurry. Then the crew audio. Captain Ruiz, female, early 30s, unconscious, respiratory distress. Paramedic, recommend Kettering toxic exposure. My father, no transfer, she is an employee. We need to handle this through company policy. Captain Ruiz, company policy does not treat inhalation injury. My mother, if this becomes a workplace claim, we lose the policy money. My father, Marlene, stop. Priya paused the recording. My hands were flat on the table. Aaron said my name. I said, play the rest. Captain Ruiz's voice came back. Transport now. I am documenting employer objection. That was proof beat 1. The official rescue record, did not match my family's story. 2 weeks later, the OSHA file arrived. The first inspection had been closed with a small penalty because Rowan Custom Print provided training records, repair invoices, and a statement blaming employee procedure. The repair invoice was dated October 16, 2019. The vendor name was Buckeye Ventilation Services. Priya called Buckeye. The owner was a man named Howard Nix. He was 68, semi-retired, and tired of being blamed for things he had not done. He sent a letter in 24 hours. Buckeye had inspected the hood on October 14, found motor failure, and recommended shutdown until replacement. They did not repair it on October 16. The invoice in the OSHA file was not theirs. The invoice number belonged to a school cafeteria fan repair from 2018. That was proof beat 2. The repair record was fake. Then came the workers' comp file. It was worse. Inside was the forged training sheet. There was also a supervisor statement signed by my father saying I had insisted on working alone against instruction. There was a witness statement signed by Brooke saying she had warned me not to touch the solvent wash. There was a doctor's note from a clinic physician named Dr. Calvin Meeks saying my memory and judgment could be unreliable because of toxic exposure. Dr. Meeks had never treated me. Priya sent a subpoena. His clinic replied that no patient record existed under my name. The note had been produced after a phone call with my mother, who described my symptoms and requested general workplace guidance. That was proof beat 3. They had used a doctor who never examined me to make me sound unreliable. I thought that would be the bottom. It was not. In June 2025, Priya received a file from Great Lakes Mutual, the company's insurer. Most of it was redacted, but one email was not because my name appeared in the subject line, and Priya had pushed for personal record disclosure. From Grant Rowan at Rowan Custom Print. To Caleb Marsh, Great Lakes Mutual Business Claims. Date, October 18, 2019, 4:02 p.m. Subject, Claire Rowan Key Person Coverage Question. Body, if an insured employee dies before the workplace investigation reaches final fault determination, does the key person benefit still pay, and how quickly can funds be released? 4 hours before I collapsed. 4 hours before anyone called 911. My father had asked how fast the policy paid if I died. I stood in Priya's office and could not hear for a few seconds, not because of my lungs, because some facts are so clear they make the room go quiet around them. Aaron read the email twice. He asked before the leak. Priya nodded, before the recorded emergency. Does that mean he knew the job was dangerous? It means we ask that question officially. That was the midpoint. Until then, I thought my parents had chosen money after an accident. That email showed my father was thinking about death and payout before the accident happened. Priya reopened everything. OSHA. Workers' comp. State insurance fraud. The Bureau of Workers' Compensation, Special Investigations Unit. And because Brooke's boutique loan had used money traced from the shop's equipment loss settlement, her bank file came into view too. I did not want Brooke pulled in at first. That is embarrassing to admit. She had lied about me. She had mocked me. She had built her store on the same event that ruined my lungs. Still, some old part of me kept separating her from my parents. Then we got the bank packet. Rowan Bridal House had applied for a small business expansion line in January 2025. The application listed me as a silent operations advisor with 10 years of safety and compliance leadership retained through family company. Attached was a letter with my electronic signature saying I supported the expansion and would help Brooke secure preferred venue contracts. I had never seen it. The IP address on the e-signature traced to Rowan Custom Print's office. Brooke had used my name, my work history, and my fake support to get a $90,000 line of credit. That was proof beat 4. It was no longer only the accident. It was an ongoing business fraud using the same false version of me. In August 2025, I confronted Brooke first. Aaron told me not to. Priya told me to let the process work. Devin told me people who forge once usually have a speech ready for the second time. I still drove to Rowan Bridal House on a Tuesday afternoon. There were ivory dresses in the window and a gold mirror near the front desk. Brooke stood behind it with a tablet, smiling at a bride and her mother. She looked polished, successful, untouched. When the customer left, I put the bank packet on the counter. "You used my name." She did not look surprised. She looked annoyed. "You were part of the family business. I did not agree to advise your store. You owe me that much." That sentence did something to me. "For what?" She leaned both hands on the counter. "For surviving and making everything about you for years." There it was again, the family math, my injury as attention theft, my recovery as inconvenience, their fraud as correction. I said, "You signed my name." Brooke shrugged. "Mom said it was fine. Dad said you would never actually challenge us because you need the family more than we need you." I picked up the packet. "You should get a lawyer." For the first time, her face changed. "Claire." "No." She lowered her voice. "If my loan gets called, I lose the store." "Then you should not have built it on my signature." I left before she could cry in a way that pulled me back. 2 days later, my mother called. "You went to your sister's shop and threatened her." I showed her a document. "You are jealous." "Of what?" "Of Brooke having a normal life." I laughed once, not because it was funny, because my body had no other place to put the anger. My mother said, "Your father and I protected you after that accident. We could have fired you. We could have let the shop go under. We carried you. You objected to the hospital transfer." Silence. Then her voice went cold. "You do not know what those records mean." "I know what your voice means." She hung up. By September, the agencies were moving. OSHA reopened the inspection under a falsified records referral. Great Lakes Mutual assigned a special investigations attorney. The Workers' Comp Bureau scheduled a review hearing. Brooks Bank froze her expansion line. Rowan Custom Print lost 2 hospital network contracts after Devin quietly alerted a procurement contact that the company's safety certification was under review. My parents did not call for 3 weeks. Then the wedding became their leverage. Aaron and I had set the date for March 14, 2026. Small ceremony, 86 guests, the Harrington House. We chose that date because it was the first warm weekend the venue had opened, and because I wanted spring air instead of hospital air in my memories. My father had agreed to walk me down the aisle when we first got engaged. He never sounded happy about it, but he agreed. On March 8, 6 days before the wedding, my parents came to my apartment without asking. My mother wore her church coat. My father carried a folder. Brooke waited in the car with the engine running. Aaron was at work. I almost did not let them in, but I wanted to see what they thought they could still do. My father sat at my kitchen table and put the paper down. Statement of clarification and family resolution. It said I acknowledged the 2019 exposure resulted from my own procedural error. It said Rowan Custom Print had acted appropriately. It said any contrary statements were made during a period of stress and memory disruption. It said I withdrew complaints to OSHA, Great Lakes Mutual, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, and any banking partners reviewing Rowan Bridal House. At the bottom was a signature line. My name was typed under it. My father pushed a pen toward me. "Sign it," he said. "No." He looked at my mother as if I had missed a cue. My mother softened her voice. "Brooke's loan closes Friday. If this nonsense stays open, the bank will pull it." "That is not my problem." My father's jaw moved. It became your problem when you chose to attack the family business. I chose to tell the truth. He tapped the paper. You will sign this, or I will not walk you down the aisle. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had taught me how to read paper weight by touch. The man who had let me climb onto pallets when I was little. The man who had asked about death benefits before a solvent job he knew was unsafe. That is your offer. My mother said, do not make this ugly. You already did. Her face tightened. Brooke deserves one peaceful week. You took enough from her. What did I take? Attention, money, years of stress. Your father aged 10 years after that accident. I stood. Get out. My father stood too. Then walk alone. My mother picked up the unsigned paper. At the door, she turned back. Who would want to stand beside someone who keeps dragging up the worst day of this family's life? I said, the man who saved me from it. She did not understand. Not yet. Captain Mateo Ruiz had retired in January 2026. I met him because Priya asked him for a declaration. He arrived at her office in a navy jacket with a folder already tabbed. He remembered the shop. He remembered my father. He remembered me on the floor. I always wondered whether you recovered, he said. Mostly. He nodded once. Mostly is still a win. He gave Priya more than a declaration. He had kept his personal incident notes because my father had filed a complaint against him after the transfer. The complaint claimed Captain Ruiz exceeded authority and damaged the company by escalating a minor exposure. The department cleared him, but the complaint stayed in his personnel file for 2 years and delayed his promotion. My parents had tried to punish the man who got me breathing. When I asked him if he would come to the wedding, he said yes before I finished. When I asked if he would walk me down the aisle if my father refused, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, if you are asking because you need a body and a suit, choose a friend. If you are asking because you want the record to be corrected in your own heart, I would be honored. I cried in my car afterward, which annoyed me because I had a safety meeting in 20 minutes. After my parents' kitchen table threat, the plan changed. The Harrington house had a private dining room for rehearsal dinners. We had booked it for Friday night, March 13. It was supposed to be simple. Pasta, salad, 30 people, no drama. Priya turned it into the witness room. She did not ambush an official process. She used one that was already scheduled. The Workers' Comp Bureau had set a virtual final review for March 13 at 4 p.m. Great Lakes Mutual and OSHA had agreed to attend because the overlapping documents mattered. Brooks Bank sent its compliance officer after receiving notice that my name appeared on a disputed loan file. Priya requested an in-person conference space because multiple parties were local and records needed to be exchanged. The Harrington house manager, who had already been pressured by Brooke for vendor access, offered the private dining room at 5 p.m. before the rehearsal dinner. My parents thought they were coming for pasta and a chance to convince Aaron's family I was unstable. They walked into a formal review. At 4:52 p.m., I stood in the hallway outside the private dining room wearing a navy dress and low heels. My wedding dress was upstairs in a garment bag. Aaron stood beside me. Captain Ruiz stood near the door with Priya. Inside were 2 long tables and a projector screen. At the first table, Priya, the workers' comp hearing officer, an OSHA compliance officer named Leanne Ortiz, Great Lakes Mutual Special Investigator Dana Cho, Brooks Bank compliance officer, and Howard Nix from Buckeye Ventilation. At the second table, my parents' attorney, Brooks' attorney, my parents, Brooke, and a man from Rowan Custom Prince Insurer who looked as if he had slept badly. Behind us, in the chairs along the wall, were Aaron's parents, my Aunt Leela, Eli Mercer, Devin from my current job, Tessa, and Captain Ruiz. That was more than 3 witnesses. That was the room my parents had avoided for 7 years. My mother saw the agency badges first. "What is this?" she asked. Priya said, "A consolidated records review. You received notice through counsel." My father looked at his attorney. The attorney would not meet his eyes. Brooke saw the bank officer and whispered, "No." The hearing officer started with the basics. "This matter concerns the reopened claim of Claire Rowan, date of injury October 18, 2019, and related fraud referrals involving Rowan Custom Print and Rowan Bridal House." My mother said, "This is the rehearsal dinner." Priya said, "The dinner starts after the review." Nobody laughed. The first slide was the fire incident report. Captain Ruiz's transfer order. The air readings. The note, employer objected to toxic exposure transport. Dana Cho played the dispatch recording. My father's voice filled the room. "No transfer. She is an employee. We need to handle this through company policy." Then my mother's voice. "If this becomes a workplace claim, we lose the policy money." My Aunt Leela covered her mouth. Aaron's mother reached for her husband's hand. My father said, "That is out of context." Leanne Ortiz, the OSHA officer, looked down at the file. "The context is an unconscious employee and a documented hazardous atmosphere." That was the first time an official said it in front of them. Not a family misunderstanding. A hazardous atmosphere. The second slide was the Buckeye ventilation letter. Howard Nix leaned into the microphone. "We did not repair that hood on October 16. We told Mr. Rowan not to run coating work until the motor was replaced." My father said, "You are misremembering." Howard opened a folder. "I brought the certified work order archive. Your signature is on the shutdown recommendation." The projector showed it. Grant Rowan. October 14, 2019. My father's signature under the words, "Do not operate coating station until exhaust motor replaced." Brooke started crying quietly. Not for me. For the loan she could feel dying. The third slide was the OSHA repair invoice. Same invoice number as a 2018 school cafeteria fan repair. Leanne Ortiz said, "This appears to be a falsified repair document submitted during the original inspection." My parents' attorney asked for a pause. The hearing officer said, "Denied. You can respond after the record presentation." The fourth slide was the training sheet with my forged signature. Priya placed my real driver's license signature, my 2019 payroll signature, and the disputed training signature side by side. The C was wrong. The spacing was wrong. The date was written in my mother's style, with a slash through the 0. My mother went very still. Priya did not look at her. She looked at the hearing officer. "We also have metadata from the scanned file. Created October 22, 2019, 4 days after the injury, not October 17. That mattered. They had created my training proof after I was already in the hospital. The fifth slide was Dr. Meeks's note. No patient file. No examination. Clinic phone log showing a 9-minute call from my mother's number. My mother whispered, "I was trying to help explain her condition." The hearing officer said, "You are not testifying yet." My mother stopped. The sixth slide was the key person policy email. 4 hours before the accident. If an insured employee dies before the workplace investigation reaches final fault determination, does the key person benefit still pay? And how quickly can funds be released? The room stayed silent long enough that the projector fan sounded loud. My father finally said, "Business owners ask coverage questions." Dana Cho said, "They do. That is why we compare timing, equipment warnings, false repair invoices, transport objections, and later claim statements." She clicked to the next slide. Great Lakes Mutual internal memo. Suspicious indicators. Pre-loss benefit inquiry, known equipment hazard, employer objection to employee transfer, post-loss falsified records, inconsistent witness statements. My father stared at the screen as if he could make it turn off. If this story keeps one person from signing a paper under family pressure, share it and subscribe before I tell you what happened in that review room. The 7th slide was about Brooke. I had thought the accident proof would hurt the most. I was wrong. The bank compliance officer stood. Her name was Maura Lynn. She was small, direct, and had a voice that made every syllable sound filed. Rowan Bridal House expansion application included a representation that Claire Rowan consented to serve as operations advisor. Brooke said it was informal. Maura clicked. My electronic signature appeared on the screen. Then the IP log. Then the timestamp. Then the office computer signed to Brooke at Rowan Custom Print. Maura said, "We have frozen the expansion line pending fraud review." Brooke turned to my mother. "You said this would not come up." That sentence did what none of the records had done. It cracked their table open. My mother hissed, "Brooke." Priya looked at the hearing officer. "Please note that statement." The stenographer did. My father pushed back his chair. "We are done." The hearing officer said, "Sit down, Mr. Rowan." He did not. Captain Ruiz stood from the wall. He did not move toward my father. He just stood, calm and solid, a retired captain who had walked into worse rooms. My father sat. Then Eli Mercer testified. He had aged from 22 to 29, but his voice still carried the same rough edge from the exposure. He told the room I pushed him out. He told them I was heading for the shutoff when I collapsed. He told them my father yelled about the order, not about my breathing. My mother stared at the table. Brooke would not look at him. Devin testified next, not about 2019, but about the 2025 attorney letter my parents sent to my current employer. It was an attempt to damage her current safety role using disputed records, he said. We reviewed her performance. She is the reason our warehouse passed 2 surprise inspections. That small sentence almost undid me. For years, my family had used the word unsafe around my name. Devin put the opposite on the record. Then Captain Ruiz spoke. He did not make it emotional. That made it stronger. When I arrived, Ms. Rowan was unconscious inside a contaminated work area. The second employee reported she got him out. The employer objected to transport. I overruled because the patient's condition required it. Afterward, Mr. Rowan filed a complaint against me. The department cleared the decision. Priya asked, "Had you delayed transport to the closer hospital requested by the employer, what could have happened?" My parents' attorney objected. The hearing officer allowed the answer. Captain Ruiz looked at me once, then back at the room. She could have lost more lung function. She could have died. There it was. Plain, official, no family spin around it. My mother began to cry. I had seen that cry before. It came when people were watching. "We were scared," she said. The hearing officer said, "Mrs. Rowan, you will have a chance to respond." My mother turned to me anyway. "Claire, tell them we were scared." I looked at her. For years, I had wanted her to say she was sorry. Not a perfect apology. Just one sentence that admitted I had been a person on that floor, not an expense, not a policy, not a problem for Brooke. Instead, she wanted me to rescue her from the sound of her own voice. I said, "I am done translating for you." My father leaned toward his attorney. The attorney whispered back and slid a notepad toward him. The review continued. The hearing officer issued preliminary findings that night. The 2019 workers' compensation denial would be vacated pending final order. My claim would be corrected from employee misconduct to compensable toxic exposure. Medical bills, wage loss, and impairment review would be reopened. The forged training sheet and false doctor note would be referred to the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation Fraud Unit. OSHA would issue a falsified records citation and reopen penalties for the equipment hazard. Great Lakes Mutual would suspend pending business claims and refer the key person policy inquiry and equipment settlement to its Special Investigations Unit. Brooks Bank would maintain the freeze and refer the electronic signature to law enforcement. Rowan Custom Prince Hospital Network vendor certification would be suspended. It was not a final court sentence. It was better than a speech. It was the first official record that said I had not caused my own near death. My father stood again after the findings. This time his voice was low. "You think you won." Aaron stepped forward, but I touched his wrist. I wanted to answer myself. "No," I said, "I think the record did." Brooke started sobbing. "My store is gone." Maura from the bank closed her folder. "Your store is under review." That is the same thing. I almost said something cruel. I almost told her she should have thought of that before using my name. But the room had enough records. It did not need my anger. My mother stood last. She looked smaller than she had in my kitchen, but only because nobody in that room was letting her control the meaning. "You are really going to let strangers destroy your family the night before your wedding?" I picked up the unsigned statement she had brought to my apartment. Priya had entered it as an attempted coercion exhibit. "You brought this to me 6 days before my wedding. To end the fighting. To erase the proof." She shook her head. "You always twist everything." Captain Ruiz said quietly from behind me, "No, ma'am, the documents are doing that." My mother turned red. For once, she had no answer that could survive the room. The review ended at 7:18 p.m. The pasta was cold. Nobody cared. The Harrington House staff replaced the food without being asked. I later learned the manager had watched from the service hall because Brooke had pressured her for months, claiming my wedding should be rooted through Rowan Bridal House, since Claire gets confused with planning. That ended too. My parents left with their attorney. Brooke left separately, crying into her phone. My Aunt Leela stayed. She walked up to me with both hands folded in front of her. "I believed them," she said. I did not comfort her. She nodded, as if she knew I could not. "I am sorry." That was the first family apology that did not ask me to pay for it. Aaron's father, who had barely spoken all night, came over and said, "We saved you chicken piccata." That should not have made me cry. It did. We ate dinner at 8:05 with the projector still cooling behind us. Captain Ruiz sat across from me. Eli sat beside Devon. Priya finally took off her blazer. Tessa poured water into my glass every time she saw my hand shaking. Nobody made a toast. Nobody needed to. At 10:30, Aaron and I walked through the empty ceremony room. The chairs were lined up. The aisle runner was still rolled at the back. My dress hung upstairs. "Do you still want tomorrow?" he asked. I looked at the room. For months, I had thought the wedding would be the day I proved I was loved despite what my family had done. After the review, I understood something cleaner. I did not need the wedding to prove anything. I wanted it because I had chosen Aaron, and he had chosen me without needing a corrected file first. "Yes," I said, "but smaller." The next morning, March 14, the sky was clear and cold. My lungs always noticed cold first. I stood by the bridal suite window and took slow breaths while Tessa zipped my dress. It was cream, simple, with sleeves because I hated being cold. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then Priya texted, "Do not answer unknown calls today. Great Lakes moved fast. Enjoy your wedding." I smiled for the first time all morning. At 1:52 p.m., Captain Ruiz knocked on the bridal suite door. Tessa opened it. He wore a dark suit and a blue tie. In his left hand was a small envelope. "I brought something," he said. Inside was a copy of his cleared department complaint from 2020. At the bottom, in blue ink, he had written one sentence. "Transport decision affirmed. Patient survived." "This belongs to you as much as me," he said. I held it carefully. "They put this in your file because of me." "No," he said. "They put it there because I did my job and they did not get the result they wanted." I nodded because speaking would have ruined my makeup, and Tessa was already holding tissues with the focus of a surgeon. At 2:00, the music started. There was no scream from my mother in the front row. There was no father pretending to be generous. There was no Brooke checking whether the photographer caught her good side. There was Aaron at the end of the aisle. There were his parents. There were my friends. There was Devin, Eli, Priya, Aunt Leela, and people who had heard the truth and stayed. Captain Ruiz offered his arm. "Ready?" "Yes." We walked slowly. My lungs held. Aaron cried before I did. "During the vows," he said, "I promise never to ask you to make yourself smaller so other people can stay comfortable." That line was not in the rehearsal. I almost laughed and cried at the same time. When the officiant pronounced us married, the room stood. I looked at the aisle behind me. For 7 years, my family had told people I was reckless, unstable, confused, jealous, bitter, and hard to love. The aisle did not agree. The practical consequences came over the next 6 months. In April, the Bureau of Workers' Compensation issued a corrected order. My claim was allowed for toxic inhalation injury, wage loss, pulmonary treatment, and permanent partial impairment review. The employee misconduct finding was removed. That was my first practical receipt. I printed it and put it in a clear folder. In May, OSHA cited Rowan Custom Print for knowingly operating the coding station after a shutdown recommendation, submitting falsified repair documentation, and failing to preserve exposure records. The penalties were not symbolic. They were large enough that my father had to sell press 4. That felt right. Not because I wanted the shop destroyed, but because that machine had become a monument to every shortcut he defended. In June, Great Lakes Mutual denied the remaining business claim and referred the key person policy inquiry to the state insurance fraud unit. The old equipment loss settlement tied to Brooks' lease deposit was reopened. Rowan Custom Print had to repay $62,400 plus investigation costs. Brooks Bank called the expansion line and closed her preferred vendor application. Rowan Bridal House stayed open for a while, then shrank to appointments only. By August, the gold sign came down from the Maple Avenue window. Brooks sent me one email. Subject, "Are you happy now?" Body, "You got what you wanted. I hope being right keeps you warm." I did not answer. In September, my parents entered pleas on insurance fraud-related charges and falsified workers' compensation records. My father received 9 months in county jail, 5 years probation, restitution, and a ban from managing safety-sensitive operations. My mother received probation, community service, and restitution tied to the forged training record and false doctor note. Brooke accepted a diversion agreement for the bank document because she had no prior record, but she had to admit the electronic signature was not mine, repay fees, and surrender her vendor application. Her boutique's landlord did not renew her lease. Some people thought that was too much. Those people had not been on the floor at 6:24 p.m. They had not heard my mother worry about policy money over my breathing. They had not spent years watching a forged signature outrank their own memory. I went to the sentencing because Priya said I had the right to make a victim statement. I wrote one, then I did not read it. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood and said only this. They made the record false when I was too sick to fight. I am asking the court to leave the corrected record where everyone can see it. The judge nodded. That is reasonable. My father stared at the defense table. My mother cried into a tissue. Brooke did not come. After court, Captain Ruiz met me on the courthouse steps. He had not needed to be there. He came anyway. You did fine, he said. I barely said anything. Sometimes that is fine. We walked to the parking lot. The air was cold enough to sting, but I did not cough. In October, the second receipt arrived. It was emotional, not legal. Eli Mercer invited me to his graduation from a fire academy. I almost did not go because ceremonies still made me nervous. Then Aaron reminded me that not every public room is a trap. Eli crossed the stage in a Navy uniform. Captain Ruiz pinned his badge. Afterward, Eli found me near the back. I joined because of that night, he said. That night was terrible. Yes, but you pushed me out before you went down. Then Captain Ruiz came in. I wanted to be the next person who knew what to do. He handed me a small laminated card. It was his Academy emergency response checklist, the one he had carried through training. On the back, he had written, "For Claire, who reached the door first." I kept that card. Not because I needed to be called brave. Because for 7 years, my family made the story end with me as the careless one. Eli's card put me back where I actually was. At the door. Trying to get someone else out. Aaron and I bought a small house in November. Nothing grand. 2 bedrooms, a fenced yard, a kitchen with windows that open easily. I check vents more than most people. I keep air monitors in the basement and garage. Aaron does not tease me about it. On the first night, we ate takeout on the floor because our table had not arrived. I put the corrected workers' comp order, Captain Ruiz's complaint clearance, and Eli's checklist card in one frame on the wall near my desk. Aaron looked at it and said, "That is a lot of paper." Good paper. The best kind. I laughed then, a real laugh, not the kind that comes out when anger has nowhere to go. I do not speak to my parents now. They sent letters through my aunt twice. I returned them unopened. My mother tried to tell people at church that I had been manipulated by lawyers. That lasted until Aunt Leela brought the OSHA order to a women's committee meeting and set it beside the coffee urn. I did not ask her to do that. I also did not stop her. The family changed after that, not healed, changed. Some cousins apologized, some disappeared. A few still say I should have handled it privately. Private was where they forged the form. Private was where they told the ambulance not to transfer me. Private was where they used my name for Brooke's loan. The truth needed a room with witnesses. Mine happened to be a rehearsal dinner with cold pasta and a projector. I still have breathing days that are not easy. Cold air can catch me off guard. Strong varnish sends me outside. I still keep one inhaler in my purse and one in the kitchen drawer. But I also have days when I walk through our house with every window open and feel the air move cleanly through each room. That is a kind of wealth my parents would never understand. They measured my life in policies, settlement checks, shop contracts, and Brooke's storefront. The official record measures it differently now. Employee exposed because employer operated unsafe equipment. Transport medically necessary. Training record falsified. Claim corrected. Signature unauthorized. Restitution ordered. Those are plain sentences. They do not hug you. They do not make the bad years vanish, but they hold when people try to bend the past. On our first anniversary, Aaron and I went back to the Harrington house for dinner, not the private room. I did not want to sit under that projector again. We sat near the front windows where the brick walls caught the evening light. Captain Ruiz and his wife joined us for dessert. Eli came late after a shift, still smelling faintly of smoke and station coffee. Priya sent flowers because she was in court. The manager brought out a small envelope. "We found this in our files," she said. It was the final vendor note from Brooke's failed preferred vendor application. At the bottom, in the manager's handwriting, one line was circled. Bride declined family vendor due to documented conflict of interest. I smiled because even the venue had kept a better record than my family. After dinner, Aaron and I walked outside. The air was cool but not sharp. I took a deep breath and held it for 3 seconds. Then I let it out slowly. Across the street, a print shop I did not know had its delivery door open. I could hear paper cutters thumping inside. For a second, my body remembered concrete, vapor, and my father's voice. Then Aaron's hand found mine. "You okay?" "Yes." And I was. Not untouched, not magically repaired, just no longer trapped inside their version. My father tried to make my wedding aisle a price. My mother tried to make my survival a burden. My sister tried to build a business on my silence. They all counted on me choosing family peace over records. But records are quiet until someone opens the folder. At my rehearsal dinner, the folder opened. The fire captain they complained about told the truth. The vent repairman brought the shutdown order. The bank officer showed the forged signature. The OSHA officer named the hazard. The workers' comp hearing officer corrected the claim. The people who mattered saw the same thing at the same time. The next day, I did not walk alone. Captain Ruiz walked beside me, steady and calm, the same way he had walked into that print shop when everyone else was arguing about money. At the end of the aisle, Aaron was waiting. Behind me were the records. In front of me was air I could breathe.